Okay, so we'll get rolling. My name is Alex Nelson. I am the Director and Education Specialist for the Coshocton County Recycling and Litter Prevention Office. Um, Coshocton County is a member of the CFLP, which is the Coshocton, Fairfield, Licking, and Perry Solid Waste District. Several of our members are here today. You're going to hear from everyone, which is great. But we are a solid waste district that is funded through the EPA, through your tip fees and some different things that happen in some of the counties as well. But we like to offer different resources just like this for the businesses and industries that are in our solid waste district, just because a lot of times until we talk about it, people don't really know some of the resources that we offer or that other businesses offer too. So Molly's here. She's going to give us some really great stuff. I know Andrea is going to present her here in a second. But it's really cool to be able to have these kind of roundtables to be able to see just what the community has to offer as a whole and how we can all work together for kind of a better world. So Andrea from Licking County is going to take over.
All right, well, we are very excited to have Molly Kathleen from The Ohio State University with us today. I'm a Buckeye alumni. I don't know if we have any other ones out here with us today too, but either way, I am super excited about the work that Molly is doing at Ohio State. And she has quite an interesting background too. She and I have run into each other numerous times over the past several years at other recycling events and stuff, and I've always enjoyed her presentations and just talking to her as a human being. She is so nice and so smart, and we're very excited to have her here today. So let me tell you a little bit about who she is and what she does at Ohio State, and then we're going to turn things over to her so you can hear all about the wonderful things that they're doing there, and also how you as a business or an industry might be able to work on some recycling at your own individual workplace. So Molly is the zero waste manager at The Ohio State University, where she leads the development and implementation of comprehensive strategies to divert waste from landfills, including initiatives around source reduction, reuse, recycling, of course, and composting. She has a Bachelor of Science degree from Ohio University. Oh, so she's a Bobcat, not a Buckeye. I don't know. You're still kind of, oh, Jake's a Bobcat as well, so he was giving you some clapping there. Anyhow, so she holds a Bachelor of Science degree from OU and is certified by the Solid Waste Association of North America in Recycling Systems Management, Integrated Solid Waste Management Systems, and Zero Waste Principles and Practices. She's been a dedicated board member of the Association of Ohio Recyclers since 2015, where she advocates for sustainable materials management across the state and works to unite recycling professionals throughout the state. Prior to joining Ohio State, Molly worked for 10 years as a waste consultant for public sector organizations, hospitals, and businesses to improve their waste diversion efforts and implement innovative waste management solutions. So she's got a lot going on over there. And today she is going to show us how Ohio State's sustainability commitments are working and how it's aiming to divert 90% of its waste from landfills. That is very, very impressive. And so, and she's going to show us how, kind of the basics of how they can actually even figure out what sort of waste they're producing, which I find really fascinating. So we're excited to have you here, Molly, and go ahead and take it away, Molly.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Andrea, for inviting me today to talk with the group, and I appreciate everybody's time. So we'll be kind of going over today what a waste characterization study is and how you can conduct one if you're interested in doing something like that for your organization, and then how you can use that data to really maximize the effectiveness of your recycling programs. So I can start sharing my screen. And hopefully I do this right. Let's see. Okay. So I think everybody can probably see a full screen slide. Okay, perfect. But while we're going through this, this can be conversational. If you have any questions while I'm covering a topic, please feel free to stop me and ask questions, or we can do that at the end, whatever works for those on the call. So see if this is going to let me advance my slides. Okay. So yeah, just a quick overview. We're going to be looking at those waste characterization studies, why you should perform one, what kind of tools you would need if you wanted to delve into this adventure, and then what it can do for you and your organization. So just kind of a quick overview. Waste characterization studies are a really important tool that I have used myself, and I have done these for clients in the past, and I think they provide an amazing amount of information and a really detailed, granular look at what your facility is producing and how it's being managed. So this can be a great tool for planning. It can illuminate what kinds of waste streams you are producing if you're unsure of the composition. And then it's basically a manual process where you're sorting through materials into different categories and weighing those and then getting that data compiled. So why should you perform one? There's a lot of reasons why somebody might choose to perform a waste characterization study. One is to provide baseline data. This is a really good way to quantify the impacts of new programs, policies, or educational efforts. So if you are making a major change in your community or your organization and you want to quantify the effectiveness of that, getting a baseline and then doing a follow-up will be able to tell you how effective those measures were. You can also identify the capture rate of your recycling to see how effective your programs or your infrastructure is. And this will also help to identify recycling contamination rates to see how your either building occupants or your residents are understanding the information and the educational materials that are provided to them. And then you can compare the performance. So if you are doing this for an organization or a city government, you can compare the performance of different buildings or different departments, and then just discovering opportunities for where you can reduce waste and also reduce your disposal costs. So there's a lot of great reasons to look into doing an activity like this. These waste characterization studies are completely customizable, so they can be scaled to fit your budget and your resources. And they can also be tailored to answer specific questions or meet your organization's needs. And so we'll kind of walk through how you can do that. Okay, so with the planning steps, there are about 6 different steps to planning a waste characterization study. So the first would be determining your scope and your labor needs. So this is just an example for the last characterization study that I did for my organization, just to kind of give you an example of what your end product might look like. So when I determined the scope, I was looking for a list of buildings at my campus that kind of hit different types of building use categories. So I was selecting a list of buildings, but this might look different for you. If you are working with a municipality, you might be looking at different neighborhoods or different types of routes that you would like to include in your study. So again, these are totally customizable for the scale. This could go all the way down to just one building that wants to do something up to an entire community. Okay, so the next step would be looking at your sample selection and your sorting periods. So the time of year and when you decide to collect a sample is important, and it will impact the results of your study. So in order to get a snapshot in time of what is representative of a normal operating period, so your results are representative of a typical behavior or a typical generation day. Some things that you can keep in mind are trying to avoid seasonal variations. So at Ohio State, we have periods of time where our students are on break or class is not in session. We also have seasonal variations where students are moving into the residence halls or moving out of the residence halls, and those are very atypical types of trash generation times. We have much higher trash, and it's not normal during move in and move out. So we avoid any of those seasonal variations when we are doing a waste characterization study. We also want to account for any types of daily fluctuations and understanding custodial and waste collection schedules. So if you are planning on doing this for a building, making sure that if you're collecting things from the dumpster, that you understand the custodial schedules. Maybe custodial only empties waste from the building on Mondays and Fridays. So just making sure that you understand all of the parameters before you select your sampling days is just one thing to keep in mind. And then minimizing the number of people who know when these will be collected. Just kind of keeping that on a need-to-know basis, just to make sure that leading up to that sample selection time, that these are typical normal behaviors. So if you are doing this for one building in particular, not announcing it to all of the building occupants that you will be doing a sample selection, and that will be able to yield results that are just typical of normal behavior. And then if you're looking at how much waste you have to pick up and include in a waste characterization study, the larger your sample, the more accurate results it will yield. So the more trash you have or more recyclables you have to sort, that's going to give you better results. So if you're working on a scale like Ohio State, for example, we did 400-pound samples for each of our buildings and for each of our waste streams. So when I was doing my waste characterization study, I was looking at the trash and the recycling. So I did 400 pounds of trash and 400 pounds of recycling per building that was included in the study. So if you are doing samples, whether this is from a dumpster or a truckload, trying to select waste from quadrants is going to give you, I would say, the fairest representation of what is coming out of a building, rather than just selecting things all from one area, because that might just give you data from one particular day or one particular area of what you're sampling. So I'm trying to, kind of look at the waste as a quadrant and selecting things that are representative of different, either different periods of the route or different areas of a building. That's helpful. And so the next step would be looking at what kinds of equipment and PPE or personal protective equipment you need if you are planning to do this on your own and not use a consultant. So if you are planning on doing this yourself, some of the things you would need to do to conduct a waste characterization study is you would need some sorting tables. Some disposable, I know we're trying to reduce waste, but disposable table covers, hand brooms like the one on the screen, and then containers for sorting, and then a scale. The more accurate your scale is, the more accurate your results will be. So the scale that I use, and I know the scale that some of my friends who are still in consulting use, go down to the 0.1 pound accuracy level. Okay, so in terms of PPE, how do you keep you and your sorters safe while you are going through waste? Some of the things that we like to use when we're doing these activities are dust masks, just to keep any kind of splashes or dust out of your respiratory airways. We also use nitrile gloves, and then we use another puncture resistant glove on top of that. So the nitrile gloves will keep any kind of liquids from being absorbed onto the skin. And then those puncture resistant gloves can protect skin from abrasive materials like broken glass. And then we use aprons. We used to use Tyvek coveralls. We found those to be very hot and difficult to work in for long periods of time. So we found that just a plastic apron was more suitable for us. But then we also use Tyvek or some type of disposable waterproof sleeve. And then safety glasses, just in case there are any splashes or any sharp debris that might fall out of a bag while people are sorting. So that's pretty much the overall of what we use in terms of keeping everybody on the job site safe. So the next step would be finding where you're going to store your trash while you're waiting to start the sorting process. So what I would recommend is creating a plan for where your samples can be transported, labeled, and stored. Ideal areas that you can conduct this activity in have limited disturbance. They are sheltered from wind and precipitation. If your trash is getting rained on, that can add weight to different categories like paper. Wet cardboard and wet paper weigh a lot more than dry. So that can throw the results off if you're weighing your materials. So somewhere that's out of the way but sheltered. And then if you're going to be doing your sorting in the same area, you'll just need somewhere that has access to power so you can plug in your scale. What we found is that garages work really well. The last time we did our study, we did it in our refuse truck garage. And then before you get started on actually sorting your materials, you'll want to identify the material categories and create data collection forms that will be used in the field. So this is one area where sometimes I see people that are doing a study for the first time, and a common, what I think is a mistake, is having too many categories. Having too many categories will slow down the sorting process, make your categories smaller, and the smaller the category, the less accurate the weight is going to be. So really think about how you're going to use the data after. And let's say you're sorting recyclables. Do you need to know the difference between number 1 and number 2 plastics, or can you just have a category of recyclable plastics? So seeing what kinds of categories you may be able to consolidate is something that I would just keep in mind when you're figuring out what types of categories you would like for your study. And then just a helpful tip, if you are having a lot of samples, having a 3-ring binder where you can keep all of your data collection forms is really helpful, just to make sure you have all of your data in one spot and you don't lose anything. So when you're going through the process of your study, just keeping all of your data compiled and taking photos while you're going through the sorting process, I think is really helpful. Photos can help tell more of the picture than just data. And it's also really helpful if you have results that are interesting or results that were unforeseen or very atypical. A lot of times people may see your data set and have questions and say, why were there so many plastics in this building versus another building? And if you have the photos, you can go back and see exactly why your numbers were the way they were. And we have found this to be incredibly valuable in the studies that we've done. We go back and reference those photos often. So that's a really useful thing to keep in mind if you're going to do something like this.
Hey, Molly, I have a quick question though. On the screen that you just had, I was looking at the different categories and I noticed that you have scrap metal, but it says that's true trash. I'm sort of assuming that Ohio State doesn't trash any scrap metal, but maybe you do depending on like what kind it is. Could you expand on that a little bit? Just out of curiosity, because I think that any of our businesses or industries that are here today may experience a lot of that same material.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So the reason that we categorize scrap metal as true trash on the waste characterization forms was because we were looking at trash and recycling that are from our dumpsters. So when the recycling in our dumpsters goes directly to Rumpke, and Rumpke does not accept metals that are not food cans or tins. So if scrap metal makes its way into our red recycling dumpsters, that's why we consider it true trash in this sense. Ohio State does, as you are correct. We do recycle a lot of scrap metal from our building construction and demolition processes, as well as from other types of activities like we'll sometimes have buildings that are getting rid of shelving. So we do recycle scrap metal, but just not when it goes in those red dumpsters just because of where it's going after. So yeah, so that's why it's categorized that way.
Thank you. That totally makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know I've kind of been talking about how Ohio State scheduled our last waste characterization study, and I realize are a large organization. So if you're looking to do this on a smaller level, there are ways to customize this for even doing it for a building. So I just wanted to throw in this slide to give you a visual of how you can do that. So I have done studies for individual buildings before, and what we did is we used a labeling and color coding system. So this could be done a number of ways, but we got basically labels that are used for garage sales or tag sales, and we did them in different colors. And each color represented a different floor or a different type of area. And then we had some of those labeled. So these are things that you could either print out ahead of time and pass out to your custodial staff, or whoever is collecting the data or collecting the waste for a study that is just specific to a building. You can give those labels out and then have the custodial staff just label the full bags when they're being pulled. So that's one way that you can do this for a much smaller scale than Ohio State has done. Okay. So for the sort itself, you'll need a couple of sets of hands to help out with this. For smaller, medium-sized sorts, 4 to 6 people is a really ideal number of people. I have had less. It just takes a little longer, but when you have 4 to 6 people, it's helpful because you can have one person on data, one person cleaning up, one person focusing on fibers, one person focusing on pulling out contaminants or whatever, however you want to break it down. But just a small group that is I think really helpful for a study like this. Basically, when you're going through this, you're going to be putting trash on a table, sorting that into categories, weighing the materials, and recording those numbers in your binder or on your data collection spreadsheets. And then when the bins are full, each bin would get weighed. So just a couple tips to have a successful sort. Before you start weighing everything, make sure you're starting with a clean work area. So when you're done with your sort, you can make sure you're getting any kind of materials that fall on the floor. So you can put those back on and get them into the correct bins. And then adding up the totals of all of your categories to make sure that that sort of matches your pre-sorted weight, just making sure that you have all of your materials accounted for. And having stationing containers outside of your sorting area. So once all of those materials are totally properly sorted, you can dump those into either a recycling or a trash container. Sorry, I'm trying to advance my slide and it seems to be stuck. Okay. And then I kind of already talked about this, but labeling your photos will help with kind of organizing your photographic data, as well as just, telling that full data story. So before we get started, kind of make a board and laminate different labels. So we'll be able to just, kind of change them out quickly. So we'll put on there which stream, whether it's recycling or trash, where it came from. So that could be a building name or a floor number, and then what stream we are sorting. So you can kind of see the bins themselves actually have labels as well. So when you're going through a sort, this might be a little in the weeds, so I won't spend a lot of time on this, but using as small of a container as needed is helpful. So we tend to use anywhere from 5-gallon buckets to 30-gallon totes for these types of activities. And these are also good because if you get kind of similar size containers, then you can stack them and save them if you need to do a sort in the future. So just kind of having all the same size containers are helpful for kind of removing out tare weights as you're going through your data. And then waping out containers in between ways. Sometimes these containers can get soiled and that can add weight onto a category. So if you are collecting data for a number of different buildings or different areas, just making sure you're cleaning out those containers in between is helpful for making sure your data is accurate. So how can your data be used when you do a study like this? There's a lot of different ways that you can use the data that is gleaned from these reports. So one way is to gauge your program performance. So you can see the capture rates and the residual waste. You can actually use this to identify needs for a new waste diversion program and be able to have that information to justify an investment in different types of infrastructure that you might not have. So that's what Ohio State did. We've identified that we had a lot of organics that were not being captured by our current systems. So our waste characterization study was able to help us to convince our leadership that it was necessary. You can also use this to quantify the maximum amount of recycling that you could have if everything was properly sorted at your facility. So you can see really what your end goal could be if everything was going well. So that's another thing that you can do. This helps with setting realistic goals for an organization. And then you can also identify areas where you need to focus your efforts. We all have limited bandwidth, limited budgets. So this can kind of help determine a particular area of a facility or a neighborhood or a route or a building that is performing differently than the others in your organization. And that can kind of help guide where you need more investment or more education and outreach. And then this can also help determine specific types of contaminants or specific items that residents or staff are not understanding properly. So if you see a lot of yogurt tubs, for example, being thrown away, in the Columbus market, we can recycle those. So if we were seeing a lot of that, we would know we need to do a special education campaign on yogurt cups. And then this can also show basically the need for recycling and composting, and also help you calculate the reductions in landfill disposal costs based on what you're generating. And then lastly, this can also identify the composition of your waste stream and how the composition can change over time as a result of new policies, programs, or educational initiatives. So we have done these before an education campaign and after to see if it was effective, just so we know on our end, is what we are doing effective, or do we need to pivot and change our message? So I had mentioned Ohio State recently did a waste characterization study. So I just wanted to show you a few examples of how we have used this study. So we did a two-phase study, and we identified different buildings that represented different building categories or use types, and we developed waste profiles for the recycling and the trash for 13 different types of buildings. And we had some key findings. So we found out that 27% of what was being generated on campus was organic material that was not being composted. So that was a really big area for opportunity. We identified that 30% of the materials that were in our trash were actually recycling, and that we had a higher contamination rate than we wanted to see. So we were also able to make a list of different observations from that data of issues that we knew we could fix. So we were seeing a lot of was the incorrect liner usage. So we were able to address that by improving our training for our custodial staff. We saw a high volume of compostable servingware that was being disposed. So we piloted a post-consumer compost program. So I won't walk through every one of these, but these are just examples of the things that you can do if you have photos and you have numbers of your waste stream. These are lessons that you can learn. So there were quite a few that we had. And then this was one project that I wanted to highlight that came out of our waste characterization study. So what our sorters were finding was we would rip open a bag, and then there would be another bag with only a couple items in each bag. And that's how, the whole bag would go. It would just be a bag full of bags with one or two items in each bag. And what we were finding was that we were really overusing trash cans and liners at our university. So we had a lot of bins in the hallways, and because of that, our bins were being really underutilized, and we had up to 11% of the total generation of a building was just plastic bags, trash bags, and that is really high. Looking at just the residential commercial sector on what is typical, what we are finding at the Swaco landfill is that plastic bags normally represent 0.7% of the waste stream. So we were exceptionally high in that area. And this is really inefficient in terms of cost as well as environmental impact. So we started a project to reduce the number of bins that we had in buildings so we could right size our waste and recycling infrastructure so it still meets the needs of the building occupants, but it's not excessive. So we have our campus broken down into zones. So we have completed this process in the first two zones. So in just two of our 5 zones on the main campus, we are now saving over $30,000 a year on just trash bags. And that's over 200,000 trash bags. We were also able to remove over 700 trash cans that were not needed in a number of buildings. And when we do this campus wide, this will save 373 tons of plastic bags from going to the landfill, and it's going to save over $130,000 a year from avoided liner costs as well as avoided tipping fees at the landfill. So this was a really impactful project that we saw just from not even having to weigh and sort the items, but just from kind of manually looking through our trash and seeing how it was being collected by our custodial staff. So yeah, that kind of wraps up the slides that I had. So if there are any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
I do have a question. Early
Yeah.
on in your presentation, you had a slide that showed a lot of the materials that you had collected, and it had like percentages on the side. And I did notice that there were quite a few that looked like they were going to be composted or could be composted. But further down on that list, it showed a lot of like our regular recyclables that we all deal with in CFLP when, especially when we're dealing with our like a residential drop-off type programs or curbside programs or whatnot. So, you know, things like aluminum cans and I saw like the aseptic containers and plastic bottles and things like that. And I thought those numbers seemed really low compared to everything else that was on that list. Are you hoping that maybe there might be more of that collected in the future at Ohio State or just anywhere in general? Like, were you surprised by those numbers the way I was surprised, or are you hoping to make those go up a little bit more?
I'm trying to see which slide that was.
Yeah, you'll have to go back. It was pretty far in the beginning. If you go through them real quickly, I'll tell you which one it was,
Okay.
if you can go back.
Yeah, I was just seeing because I was able to change it on my other monitor, but it wasn't showing up on the one I was sharing. So, okay.
Keep going. It was something that was on the right-hand side, I remember. If I see it, I will let you know.
Okay.
It's that one
Oh,
right there.
okay.
Trash
Um,
composition thing. So yeah, like if you look up at the top, you've got a lot of like the compostable food and servingware, recycled paper, fibers, and there's your trash bags that you talked about. But then, you know, you get down past like the scrap metal and plastic bottles, and those numbers are very, very, to me, they seem very low. Is it just because people aren't using them a lot? Are you hoping that people
yeah.
use those more and recycle them more, or what?
So this was an example of one of the products that we got from the waste characterization study. So this was for the trash stream. So I'm actually glad that we are not seeing a lot of recyclables in this particular data page that I have. Um, so so yeah, so this one was specifically for the trash dumpsters. Um,
Okay, that makes a little more sense. So that way, hopefully, people are recycling some of those items more and not putting them in the trash.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, this is kind of what we were trying to do with our last study. So we have over 600 buildings on our main campus, and it would be unrealistic for us to be able to look at all of those. So we tried to get something that was representative of just, say, an administrative building or just a residence hall. And so we looked at those like really common uses of buildings, and what we were hoping to get were typical results that were representative of all of the buildings in that category. So looking at this Ackerman Road complex, that is an admin only space. And going through the trash, we were able to say, okay, so we are seeing, you know, our top category is recycling, and that's admin only. So this is faculty and staff. These are people who are here and they have to go through training in order to be here. So we knew, okay, this is not the transient population that goes through the regular university system where you're getting new students every year. These are people who might be here for years. So we knew that this was going to be a really good opportunity to put in staff composting in the kitchenette areas. And it turned out to be pretty successful. And we also have compost drop-offs for the staff to, at this building as well. But yeah, we knew that there was, a ton of food being generated because people are working there all day. They're bringing in their breakfast, they're bringing in their lunch, and yeah, so that's what we're seeing in that particular slide.
Got it. This sort of reminds me of the fact that all of us in CFLP, we work with our government buildings to collect recycling. And it's probably a very similar situation to that we see in our government buildings because it's it's a captive audience already. Like you said, they're employees, they're people that have been here for a long time. And we, at least here in Licking County, we definitely see a much better rate of, or less contamination rate in our government buildings, just like your Ackerman Road complex, than we do in our public bins, because we do have the opportunity to work with these folks and let them know the education part of things, what we want to see in there, what we don't want to see in there. And we can even use email or signage or whatnot to get them to even do better. It's a little harder when you're dealing with the general public. So yeah, anyway, this all makes a lot of sense to me now. I just totally forgot that it was trash only or didn't pay attention to that when you were going through that slide. But so hopefully that's a good sign, like you said, that the reason why those regular recycling items are so low on this chart is because they're already recycling them. And where it comes from too makes a lot of sense with this. So thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, of course. But yeah, and so you said that you are doing a lot of work with municipalities, local governments. I did a study for the city of Columbus, and what they did was they did two side-by-side administrative buildings. And it wasn't intentional at first, but they ended up kind of using the results as kind of a way to motivate the buildings to almost compete with each other to be more sustainable. So they were one of the buildings that decided to break down their waste study by department. And so we were able to see, okay, accounting is doing really great, but finance could, use some help. So so it was kind of a fun way for them to get their data and be able to use it as more of like a friendly competition to make improvements.
That's cool. Does anybody else have any questions for Molly while we're here? If so, turn on your video or raise your hand or something so we can get those answered. Well, I don't think I'm seeing anything then. So thank you very much, Molly, for presenting all of that information. I think it's really interesting to see what you have found and that this is truly something that any of us can do. I noticed that Ashley Warner is on the call. She is from here in Licking County at Armor Source, where they make ballistic helmets for the military. And she and I met, I don't know, it's been a couple of years, I think already actually, but we've been in touch since then. And we had talked about them, Armor Source doing something like this too, to really identify what types of waste they have. And I know they started a competition between their departments to their, with just like, again, the regular recyclable stuff, the metal cans and the bottles and things like that, to get everybody really enthused about recycling. And I was thrilled that she participated in that. So this stuff does work. We've seen it happen. So thank you very much, Molly. We appreciate your help. And we are going to turn things over, since this is very appropriate, since it shows that Ohio State wants to do a lot more composting or is going to work on doing a lot more composting. Haley from Perry County was going to talk a little bit about composting and how important it is and how businesses and industries could do that. So we're going to turn things over to Haley over there today.
Thank you, Andrea. Yeah, so I'm just going to touch on composting. I do have a guide that I will have Andrea send out later. The beginning of it just has general compost information, but then the second half of that guide is kind of directed towards our businesses and industries. But yeah, as Molly was saying, diverting your waste can save you a lot of money. So just to kind of give you a view on that, Southeastern Correctional Institution in Lancaster started composting all of their food waste in 2013, and they were able to save $95,000 just from trash hauling and 10,000 in trash bags. And while I know our businesses won't have as much food as they did, they don't have as many people, it's still kind of neat to look at and how much they were able to save. Composting and any of your green efforts are also going to look really good on your business to your community. If you're able to show kind of what you're doing, helping out the community, it's going to look really good on you. And there's also some government incentives if you are a green business and doing some stuff. So if you're worried about getting started, money cost wise, there are some grants every now and then that you can look at to kind of get you started on that stuff. And then when we are thinking about our composting, I kind of want to break it into two categories. So there's in your break room where you're going to have your food waste or your coffee waste, which I think is what we all typically think of when we're thinking of composting. But there's also the stuff that's out on your floor. So if you have wood pallets or wood crates, or you've got a lot of area that you're mowing, or you've got branches, you're cleaning up your flower beds. In that guide, I have a list of places that will take that material and turn it into mulch. Now, it has to be untreated, so it can't have anything on it. But as long as it's untreated, they will take it, turn it into mulch. And quite a few of them will work with you. So if you drop off stuff and you buy mulch, they might take your stuff for free. Or if you drop off stuff, they might give you some mulch for a discount. Just something to think about as we're heading into that time of year where we're going to start getting our flower beds ready and you might be in the need for mulch. I also want to stress that this doesn't have to be a one person job. I really recommend having a green team or a group of people working on either your composting or recycling efforts or whatever green incentive that you're working on. I've seen in some of our schools where they have one teacher that does all of the recycling and kind of heads that up, and then they retire or they go to another school and then nobody knows what they're supposed to be doing or what goes in their recycling bin. So if you have a group of people that all know what the plan is, what goes where, if somebody leaves, then that plan won't fall through. You have another set of people that can keep that going. So I really recommend that. And then if you're unsure about composting in your office, you don't want to run a compost bin, that seems like too much, there are some businesses that will take your food waste. We don't have a lot kind of in this part of Ohio, unfortunately. The main one that I have found is Go Zero, which that guide will have all of their information in it. So I highly recommend getting on their website. They have a lot of info. But you can become a drop-off site or host a site. So if you're not having a lot of food scraps, but you want to do something, you can become a host site and people in the community can sign up and pay for that service and they will bring their compost stuff. So you'll basically have like a giant trash can. They're like a trash hauler, but for compost. And they will pay the people and they bring their compost, put it in that bin, and that kind of offsets the cost. So I think if you're a host, if I'm understanding correctly, you won't have to pay too much into it. The people that are participating are paying a fee, and that offsets you being a host. And you set the hours when people can come and drop it off, so it's not just whenever. And they really work with you. So I would highly recommend getting on their website. I'm not sure how far they reach. They didn't really have any information on if they have a certain zone that they'll only work in. But if that's something you're interested in, giving them a call and seeing if they can work with you on that. And then that guide will be sent out. But if you have any questions, reach out to any of us. Be happy to help you.
Thank you. Haley, were you talking about the Go Zero and how far they reach? Is that what you were referencing?
Yeah, I wasn't sure. I tried to look on their website if they kind of had a range that they'll go to, or if they'll reach everybody in our CFLP counties. But I couldn't really find anything, or if they're more kind of closer to Columbus. I wasn't quite
talked to
sure.
I talked to them a few years ago because they actually deal with some of the trash and recycling at some events that are up here in Licking County. A couple of like smaller concert venues, like outdoor concert venues, they have dealt with the trash and recycling. So I know they come to Licking County. I'm not sure where else. I feel like they were kind of almost like a startup when I first started talking to them a few years ago. So I don't know if they've expanded or not. I don't know. I'm not seeing Alex or Carrie say, yeah, I know them or I've heard of them or anything. So they may be fairly limited. But I feel like I do remember them being like right on the Licking and Perry County border, like the Thornville-ish area maybe, or maybe even further down your way. So they may not reach all of us. But I just thought I'd ask. I thought that's who you were still referencing. So, okay. Any other questions for Molly or Haley? If not, we will turn things over to Carrie to wrap everything up for us, I think.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Molly, for presenting. That was a fantastic and very informative presentation. It's interesting to see how like large campuses like Ohio State is able to function and handle all of that waste. It's incredible. So thank you for doing what you do and educating administration and students for taking care of their waste properly.
Thank you.
All in all, I mean, upcoming events for at least Fairfield County, we have a couple things to touch base. We're going to be doing an Earth Day event coming up on April 26th at Seeds of Change at Rising Park. The other event that we are doing is Electronics and Shredding Day, which will be April 24th at the Recycling Center in Lancaster. It's 1761 East Main Street. That'll be from 3 to 6 o'clock. Does anyone else have any upcoming Earth Day celebrations that they would like to share while everyone's on Zoom?
Yeah, so we are doing one. I'm partnered with our Soil and Water in our park district. Ours will be April 22nd, which is on Earth Day. It's a Tuesday from 3 to 6 at the Glenford Fort Preserve, which Soil and Water owns. So there'll be some hiking trails. We'll have some guided hikes, some games, hopefully, just all kinds of stuff.
And from Lincoln County, we will be at, it's not an Earth Day event, but it is our Board of Developmental Disabilities has a summer kickoff event every year, focusing on their families that they serve mostly, but it is open to the public as well. And I will be there with a booth about Earth Day and recycling. And since it's so close to Earth Day, it's on May 3rd in downtown Newark. So if any of you are interested in attending that, let me know. I just got the details like last week, so they're not even overly familiar in my brain yet at this moment, but we'll be at that. Okay. Well, I think we will wrap things up then. And just a reminder for all of the attendees, I will email Haley's compost guide for you. And once we have this fully recorded and organized, I will send that link to you. And then I know I believe our 4 counties will probably share that link on their Facebook or newsletters or anything like that too. So Molly, you're going to get out there, more people seeing your smiling face out there, hopefully. So thank you again, Molly. That's so informative and like Carrie said, very fascinating. So we appreciate your help and thank all of you for joining us today, and happy upcoming Earth Day and spring and everything. So thanks everybody. We'll finish this up. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy Earth Day.